This nibble originally aired on RSBANDB Update, episode 770. The Zodiac is back. Enjoy. So as everybody's aware, next week, Archaeology is going to be launching the 28th skill in-game, and, this is something we've waited a long time for it to arrive, and, this is something that's going to have a lot of lore associated with it, and there's already been a series of lore journals put out, so we thought we'd do a bit of the legwork for our wonderful listeners and build up a nice summary of the lore thus far and talk a bit about it. And, of course, we have a perfect person here joining us to have this discussion, and that's Diana from Clan Quest. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Shane. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you've been on for many of our quests in the past, from the Cheesecake Quest to most recently the Once Upon a Slime Quest.
Mm-hmm.
Very fun. Very fun. So, as I mentioned, Archaeology, 28th skill. We've seen the gameplay mechanics and what everybody, at least in my camp at Clan Quest, is probably most excited about, in addition to some of the PVM folks there, is the lore that we will unearth from RuneScape's past, in particular, the God Wars. The skill will launch with 5 dig sites covering the various factions of the God Wars, including Zaros, Zamorak, Saradomin, Armadil, and Bandos. And, we look at the past in terms of what we've received in terms of archaeology coverage, and the community has branded this skill in many ways as the new lore skill. It'll feature lore drops throughout as a bit of a random event that you get in the skill. You'll learn a bit about the dig site that you're at, and the whole point of each dig site is actually to uncover various mysteries that are there while leveling up the skill. There's also going to be the chance to have mini quests throughout the entire leveling experience, which, I am personally wondering how many of those there are going to be, but we'll just have to wait for Monday to see what happens with that. But nonetheless, we just wanted to provide people with a bit of background on all the past lore that's been provided in the dig site journals. So I think we can start off with the lowest level dig site, which is Kharid'et, which is the starting dig site. It's going to be Zaros themed, of course, located near Al-Kharid, and I think everybody who knows the desert was expecting this one to be Zaros themed, so there's not much surprise there. And in going through the lore journal, Dr. Nabanik discovers 2 artifacts, one of which is a Zarosian art piece, which is purple and crystal themed, and the other was an armored mask. Now, this is going to look similar to Centistan, the old dig site from the dig site quest, but Kharid'et is actually an important Zarosian stronghold. It was the gathering point of powerful objects that the Majorat found from all over the Kharidian desert, and they even found something called an ancient papyrus, which you can have a look at in the journal itself, and this is an example of one of the art pieces there. And if this is the kind of art that we're going to have in the archaeology skill, it is absolutely amazing. What did you think of the art pieces that we saw in this piece here?
It was, hang on, let me just open it up. It's really interesting. It's very stylized, and it's, leaving a lot up to interpretation. I think on the right there, you can see what's going to be at the core of the dig site.
Yeah.
Like there is something at the middle that we work down towards.
Yeah, with that
but we don't know what it is.
With that very present Zarosian symbol right on top there.
Yeah, and you've got like the 4 runes in the middle.
Yeah.
Or the blood runes and the things in the middle.
Fire, water, law.
Earth, air, and then blood at the top.
Air, right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I almost, as everybody sees there, I almost mistook the Earth symbol for something else. But anyways, there was an interesting part of this journal piece, a quote from it. "My lord, I beseech thee, reach out to me and lend me your ear." What do you think that could mean?
Well, he's obviously talking to Zaros.
Yeah.
And I think just to make it really clear for everyone who's not, who may not have done the Dig Site Quest or City, is it Dig Site Quest? But Dr. Nabanik is Azanadra. That's his human form.
Yeah, and Temple at Centistan is of course the sequel to that.
Yeah. So Dr. Nabanik here is talking to Zaros and trying to communicate with him. And we don't know what Zaros is.
And the sense I got when I was reading this is that he did actually communicate with Zaros, except Zaros was in his non-corporeal form. That's why the person taking down this journal was completely blown away and had no idea what was going on. At least that was my interpretation of it.
Yeah, that seems like it's what's going on.
All right. What did you take away from this journal?
Well, It's quite an interesting one. I think this site's going to be pretty good for most lorehounds because we know a lot about the Zarosian Empire anyway. It's featured really heavily in the lore so far. But it's kind of a really important location in the overall story because it's where the Majorat first joined Zaros. I don't know how familiar people are with this story, but when the Majorat first came to Gielinor, they were fighting for the deserts. So they were fighting for Icthlarin.
Right.
Icthlarin, I can't say his name properly. But at some point during that war, they defected to Zaros. I think Sliske is the one who precipitated it.
Yeah.
And this is where they first met him and kind of turned the tide of the war or changed the sides. So that'll be a really interesting event to learn more about. It's kind of for me, it's on par with the betrayal that we got to see in Children of Ma.
Oh, yeah. That was a good scene.
Yeah, so it's going to be, that's one of the reasons I'm excited for it. And then the second one is, like I said, Azanadra's going there. And he was there for that defection. So how's he going to react to all of this? What are we finding in, his temple? And Azanadra was the leader of the Zarosian Church and kind of still is, but the Zarosian Church doesn't really exist anymore. So, yeah, his interactions with it as a character are going to be really interesting as well. And uncovering the Second Age history, this Zarosian dead history.
And then I think
what's that going to be like?
Yeah, and then I think the question that comes from that is, what are the Majorat that are left over going to think about this, including Dr. Nabanek, which I'll let you explain exactly who he is.
Oh yeah, I've just I just went over this, Shane. Dr. Nabanek is Azanadra.
There we go.
So, yeah, that's his disguise. I don't know whether... The thing I can't work out through Dr. Nabanek's interactions is whether people are aware that he's Azanadra or not. I don't think
I don't think so.
I think that's just between, him and the World Guardian at this stage.
Yeah.
That might be blown out into the open.
And if that were to happen, the question is, would there be any fallout from that? Because we're living in a different world post the World Wakes and being World Guardian and having all this information. We are entrusted to hold all these secrets, as it were, and that's why I asked to just spill the beans on that name, because there are players out there who might not be aware of that fact, that the link is so tight between those two. But at the end of it, when you put yourself on the level of your character knows. But does the average person who is going to be walking through this dig site helping out know? The player-owned nerds, as they were called in
player-owned nerds,
in one of the dig site Q&As. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. And what was it in Ritual of the Majorat when? Okay, I'm going to really butcher his name here, and I can only apologize for this. But Wahisital, his human form was Ali the Wise.
Yeah.
And when that was revealed, that was a shock to the other NPCs in the quest. That was, something shocking and worth commenting on.
So then by that theory, they probably don't know.
They probably don't know.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to see how people react.
Yeah.
But yeah, this particular one, Kharid'et, is one I'm particularly excited for.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to be excited about that one, just because, Zaros has always been the godlike creature that everybody would flock to for, following and worshiping.
Yeah, there's a lot of Zaros fans around. A lot of Zaros fans.
Yeah, I want to say I was the first back in the day, but...
You were the first, of course you were.
Yeah. In any case, what do you think we're going to discover from this one? If you had to just go out.
I think we're going to get some more. Oh, it's really hard to tell because they say there might be mini quests and lore drops all the way through it, but we don't really know what direction they're going to take that in. Like, are we going to get kind of event lore? Are we going to get, little informations about what battles took place? Or are we going to get more character-focused ones? Like, is Azanadra going to get some development? Is there going to be new characters introduced that aren't alive anymore?
Right.
Are we going to get some development on what the Empire itself was like?
I think that'd be really neat to see just how expansive it was, because we've heard how big it was, but we didn't know what it was exactly like.
Yeah, so it's kind of modeled on the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Kind of that's the real life.
That's a general feeling, I think. That's a good
And
analogy.
in terms of scale and power as well, like has been described as the greatest empire Gielinor ever seen. So are we going to get more information on that?
Yeah.
I hope so. I really hope so.
And folks, this is just one dig site that you can come to expect. And, as you could tell, we could probably spend another 25 minutes or so just batting ideas back and forth on this one. But we will be, of course, as the skill unearths itself, doing more coverage on all the lore aspects of each of the dig sites in the following weeks that Archaeology is launched. The next one up is the Infernal Source, which is just north of there at the Jolly Boar Inn basement. It's Zamorak themed. And the Infernal Source, of course, does have a connection to Mavario and Mavario's device. And this journal quite specifically asks, what exactly is it? And it goes to a point where Mavario says that he believes that time sprites are interfering with the device, and it worked before the time sprites appeared. And for the player's sense, the time sprites are the little in-game mechanic that you follow around for higher XP and a more lean-forward archaeology experience. We don't know right now what exactly time sprites are going to do from the lore perspective in the skill, or even if they're going to have one. I assume they would, since this is the lore skill. But there was a question asked in here, and this one made me chuckle because I think many RuneScape players could identify with this. They say, we don't really hire anyone normal, do we? In terms of people working at the dig site and things that are happening there, all sorts of weird things.
It's just one thing after another, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Then there was a exchange between Mavario and Rainier. I'm guessing that's how that's supposed to be said, with words mentioned including pot hunter, treasure hunting lunatic, and we will cut your funding, which, those are things that you would expect to hear from a government bureaucracy in this day and age. But, with Mavario involved, you have to really anticipate that something big is going to be happening at this one, and being Zamorak themed, we already have the peering into that after the Zamorak heist quest, Dishonor Among Thieves. And
brilliant quest.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And I think the biggest question that we can kind of meander off into our general discussion on this one is, what is the monolith?
So the monolith, when I was writing up my notes for this one and doing a bit of research for this little section, I kind of forgot what the monolith was.
Yeah, me too.
And it's only really just before we started here that I remembered that we see it at the dig site. When I say the dig site, I mean the dig site, capital letters, which becomes the Archaeology hub. Yeah. So that monolith is the great big thing in the center that you've seen, possibly we've seen in some preview videos. And obviously this is where it was found. And then it must get activated somehow. But I remember at the RuneFest demo for Archaeology, the monolith was standing in the middle of the Archaeology hub, just kind of spinning around with lots of light coming out of it. So I believe it might be some kind of power source, but beyond that, I really don't know what it is.
All right, so we'll have to deal with more research on this once the skill arrives. And
I think it'll be one of the mysteries that's solved throughout the skill is, what is this thing and what can we do with it?
Yeah. Okay, so other notes on the Infernal Source. Mavario, we haven't seen him for a while. We primarily know him from While Gothic Sleeps and Ritual of the Majora, which are two very important quests in RuneScape's history. Mm-hmm. And
so,
go ahead.
I was about to say, do you want me to dive into a quick summary of them? Or?
Please.
I say quick summary. This might they're not quick quests.
They're not, but we're going to try and keep it quick.
Yeah, so While Gothic Sleeps came out in 2008. Just let that sink in for a second. And I think it was the first Grandmaster quest.
It was.
And it was basically where we started to fight Lucien as the main antagonist. He was the main antagonist of the Fifth Age, and this was one of his big moments. And yeah, basically it's where we first find the Stone of Jas. And Mavario was key to that.
One of the first Elder artifacts, which we know what happened to it in Sliske's Endgame, blown to bits. And I will put a whole spoiler thing on this if people don't want lore spoiled to them.
Oh, yeah, big lore spoilers on all of this, by the way. Yeah. Huge lore spoilers.
This is more for people who want to kind of have a leg up as they head into archaeology, because you are going to hear about all these things.
Yeah. So this was basically one of the quests that kicked off a lot of the storylines that have since come into the 6th Age, kind of with the Dragonkin and the Majorat and all that jazz. Terrible pun. I'm terribly sorry. That was unintentional.
All right. Ritual of the Majorat.
So Ritual of the Majorat is one of the lead-ons from While Gothic Sleeps. And it was the first time we got to see all the Majorat coming together for, clues in the name, for their ritual. It's another Lucien quest, and it was actually his finale quest because, spoiler alert, he dies at the end. It's another one with Dragonkin in it. Mavario, I think, pops up a couple of times. It's been a long time since I've done these quests.
I think he does. So. Me too.
Yeah.
One thing.
But I think the point is that we're getting a character who hasn't really had much of an influence Ritual of the Majorat was 2011. So he's been running around in the cavern underneath the ritual site for 10 years now.
Yeah.
And he's finally getting a bit more screen time.
And, with this, just to underscore the importance of this, in my view, Ritual of the Majorat was the quest that set up the events leading to the World Wakes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of a finale to some quest lines, but you're right, it did also kick off a lot of others.
Yeah.
Particularly it was the start of Slisko's quest line.
Yeah, it was the very, very early rumblings of the fact that we might be headed to the 6th Age kind of thing, but we didn't know that at the time. And you picked up on something relating to I wouldn't say modern, but just going to say a real world piece of fiction that the Infernal Source is based on with this.
Yeah, so RuneScape and Jagex material often features nods to pop culture, and there's references all over the place to comedy and Monty Python style stuff. But we've got a bit more highbrow for this one. Dante's Inferno, which is a piece of classical literature, is being referenced quite heavily. Basically, I think I haven't actually read it myself, but it's the title character going down through the 9 circles of hell into a center. And at that center in Dante's work is Satan himself. So if we have a parallel to that here, I mean, first off, kudos for actually, reading something that's not Monty Python. And there is something at the bottom. There is something very big at the bottom, and we've been told to bring Silverlight. So it's a demon, whatever it is.
Yeah, and this is a piece I haven't read as well, but this is telegraphing what we're going to find in Infernal Source. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
There is a big bad at the bottom for, I think, possibly the PVMers to get stuck into.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about that a bit. And you're probably wondering, what are two lore people going to talk about PVM? But you have some ideas on this.
I'm going to dive into some wild speculation and go back to 2017 RuneFest, the first RuneFest I went to, where they revealed Hostilius, who, as a boss fight, as one of the big endgame bosses. He was the Chthonian ruler, again, I'm sorry if I butch that pronunciation, of Infernus, which is the demon homeworld. And he pops up a couple of times in kind of the lore in general. He was the one who Zaros tricked into giving 12 legions of demons to come to Gielinor and kind of conquer and start his empire. And then in the Third Age, when Zamorak first ascended, the first thing he did was go to Infernus and lead the Avernic demons in a rebellion to overthrow their rulers. And he banished Hostilius to the Abyss, which is kind of this space between worlds that we travel through when we teleport. And he's been trapped there ever since, Hostilius, I mean. So yeah, I remember the concept art for the boss fight, and I couldn't find it whenever I was, doing my research for this. But yeah, that was a couple of years ago now. And I wonder, huge speculation, it probably isn't. But are we going to find Hostilius at the bottom of the Infernal Source?
We could, last year when they launched the Third Elite Dungeon, they brought it out with a quest. And that quest wasn't announced until day of.
And it was a big quest.
It was, and we've been dry on PVM for a long time in terms of major boss updates. So maybe they could be kind of just throwing this one under the radar, that this might be something that is unlocked through some level of the archaeology skill. And I don't want to get anyone's hopes up here, but maybe. I mean, there's precedent of it in the past.
Fun if it was.
Yeah.
And if you go down there and you get the bottom of hell, you find this enormous trapped demon that you have to fight. I mean, how fun would that be?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One question I had on this, is there any possibility that the Infernal Source could connect up with Floor 61 at Daemonheim or have some kind of lore hook up into that?
I wonder. It kind of depends how heavily the gods themselves feature in this skill. I mean, for people who don't know, Floor 61 is the Zamorakian headquarters. It's where Zamorak's based at the moment.
Yeah, and that's why I was wondering.
Currently inaccessible through dungeoneering. But I think I remember this might have been at RuneFest again, that 2017 RuneFest again, where they talked about making it a kind of boss fight, where you get to the bottom of Daemonheim, you go one floor deeper, and you have to fight some kind of Zamorakian force.
There we are.
Or Zamorak himself, which I think would be, a bit weird. But
I don't know. At this point. Yeah. And so for the PVMers, there's two little bones that you could potentially have coming into next week's Archaeology launch. So just keep that in mind. The Infernal Source might be interesting to you. All right.
I'm quite excited for this one because I remember for the preview video they did, it looks amazing. I mean, all these sites look amazing.
Yeah, they do. They do.
But this one, the aesthetic they've gone for is just like, oh, yes. Yes, please.
Now, the next one is Everlight, which is Icene themed, located off the coast of Mauritania. And those of you who know your Icene lore and have done the Myrek series will know exactly why it is located off the coast of Mauritania. The perceived goal with this one is discovering the fate of the vampire strike force who gave their lives for Lord Zamorak in the fight over there. And, many people at this dig site, in the lore at least, have been asking, why do the time sprites keep leading to Icene corpses? And that's something we're going to uncover there. Vanescula also does not want the Archaeology Guildmaster to have anything to do with the lighthouse that they uncover. And one thing that is very ominous, or maybe, I don't know, beautiful in a way, depending on how you look at it, is that it's described in the journal that the time sprites moved from the dig site out over to the water, and the water started shining, and the big Everlight, I guess we're calling it, what are we calling it? Like a beacon, I guess? A lighthouse.
It's a lighthouse.
Rose up, and it is the symbol of hope for the Icene. So we're trying to figure exactly why that happened and what's going to be involved around that. And Vanescula, for some reason, wants the light from Everlight gone and taken away forever with this. So,
yeah.
And, this is the one that I am perhaps the most excited about. And I know I said that about the Zaros one, but this is one that when I was playing through that quest line, it was just like, okay, we need a little bit more lore on this, please, just a little bit more. Yeah. And we never did get it before the quest line wrapped, and this is our chance to do that.
Yeah, the vampire quest line, the Muraki quest line, is quality from start to finish. Quite long and quite in depth, but it was really, really good. So quite cool to be going back to Mauritania, getting some more kind of lore in that kind of area, and more Vanescula Dracan, and I love her.
Yeah. She's
stone cold and brilliant, and I love her. But this is going to be another really interesting one, because it's the Saradominist one.
Yes.
And we don't know an awful lot about Third Age Saradominism. So the previous ones, like the Zarosian one and the Zamorakian one, we already know quite a lot about them and their lore. But this is one that we're going slightly into uncharted territory, which is going to be good. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and, many people automatically just always started off with following Saradomin, when back in the day we only knew there were three before the quests were developed: Saradomin, Gothics, and Zamorak, of course. But when you expand this out, the followers of Saradomin, the Icene, they, in their own right, have their own very unique lore elements to it, and that was partially uncovered in the quest line. But I imagine we'll be learning more about that and how this all split apart with the Zarosian influence around there, Zamorak, and pretty much everybody else that happened back when these folks were, I guess you could say, not almost extinct, because I don't know that there's many Icene left, are there?
There aren't many left at all. I think I can Oh, there's less than 5, I think,
Yeah.
in game. There's Queen. Oh, why are all these names so hard to say? Queen Erefite, I think, who you find in the last couple of quests in the Mareki series. You have her son, Safalan,
Yep.
who's half Icene, half human. There's, I think there's a couple more. There's the ginger. What's her name? Saradomin's general in the God Wars.
Commander Ziliana.
Dungeon. Ziliana, that's it. And there's one more who hangs around in the Falador Castle and has been there for a while now. But they're the only ones I can think of who are still around in game.
So very limited.
Very limited. There used to be a lot more of them. And I think what we're going to see is some more details about a Third Age conflict where a vampire strike force invaded Hallowvale, which is what used to be Mauritania. It used to be a Saradominist settlement of Icene.
Yes,
and I
right.
think we're going to see what happened when the vampires invaded. What I assume is their capital, which is where the Everlight comes in. I don't know whether you want me to go a little bit more into where the Everlight comes from.
Yeah, let's do that.
So what we know about Icene is that they're another alien race. They've come from a different world and they were brought to Gillinor by Saradomin. But the world they came from has this year-long day-night cycle. So, it turns very, very slowly. And that means the night, which lasts for a year, is deadly. They freeze to death. There's no food. You can't live there. So what they did, they would fly around the world, kind of keeping ahead of the night, staying in the daylight all the time. So they were constantly in light. And I think how the lore goes is that when they came to Gillinor, the idea of a 24-hour or however long a day is in RuneScape, it gets dark every night. That's obviously going to be quite distressing for creatures like that.
Right.
So Saradomin created this lighthouse, so they would always have light. And it's kind of the symbol of hope and this is their home.
Hence the term Everlight.
Yeah, hence the term Everlight. And I think it was destroyed by the vampires when they invaded, obviously. And now it's back, which might be why Vaneskina doesn't like it.
It harkens back to an age where, they probably want to forget that because the vampires would definitely see that as a victory at this point.
Yeah, kind of, we destroyed this and now it's back.
Oh no, what's happening next?
Yeah.
All right. What else do you think about Everlight?
It's gorgeous. It's so pretty. This was the demo level at RuneFest. So there was a little bit at the hub and there was a little bit at Everlight. And it is the atmosphere and the lighting of it is it's very somber. And I remember there's a fantastic piece of, I don't know whether it's concept art or kind of the inspiration art they use for it, that has all these very low, the dark dankness of Mauritania and then this huge blue lighthouse coming out of the ground. And the contrast of the light, it just looks so good. And the aesthetic of it is kind of, I said that the Zarosian Empire was Roman. This is classical Greece. The Saradominist one is from classical Greece. So again, very beautiful classical architecture and aesthetic.
And
so, yeah, go on.
And just the fact that we're taking from ancient Rome and now ancient Greece, it really shows how you can, take something as the bedrock of an idea in a story or a video game in this place, modify it to fit your game's world, and yet it can tell a completely different story while still feeling just a tiny, tiny bit familiar.
Yeah, it kind of helps because people kind of know what to expect.
Yeah.
If you're building on a real life trope, but you can obviously adapt that to whatever suits.
It's impeccable design in that case. And this was one that they actually put a bit more into in terms of the graphics polish and the extra time that they took when it was going to launch. They showed it on stream and everyone was just blown away at it.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to this. I think I'm going to be going around with my little camera taking loads of screenshots for this one.
I think we're going to have to do a graphics section for this skill as well.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Anyways, anything else?
Speaking of pretty ones.
Move on to Stormguard?
I don't think so. I think I covered all I wanted to cover for that one.
All right. Stormguard Citadel. And, this is something you might have heard of before, and it's easy to imagine where we're going with this one. The entrance, and I underscore this, that the entrance is at the Temple of Ikov, but the actual dig site itself is going to be Armadillo themed, and that means it's going to be up in the sky. It's said to be the home of avian sea inventors, and you can imagine that this is probably where our invention tilt in this skill is going to come in, at least in the beginning. And this entire Stormguard Citadel has been marketed as the opportunity for you to discover as what happened to Armadil's laboratory to make it a pile of floating rubble in the sky. And when you think about it, floating rubble in the sky, there still must be some kind of magical force that's still there to make a pile of rubble actually float. And they're doing research there involving Ethereum that was used to create the Magnum Opus. And just for anybody wondering, Ethereum armor is actually a cosmetic override in the mining and smithing skill that you can get by completing Artisans Guild research, or I guess, what do they call it there? Experience, or
yeah, something like that. Have you managed to get the concept art for the Ethereum armor?
No, I don't have the concept artwork for the Ethereum
I'll see if
armor,
I can find it.
but I have seen it in game, and it is something I want to go for when I have.
It's another thing that's very, very pretty.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll see if I can put. Can I put the image in the Google Doc?
Yeah, please do. And you know what I wanted to do is to really just, in terms of going for this, it just seemed like something that was so different from the armor that we had that it was just something that I wanted to have at the end of the mining and smithing skill. But it was initially going to be a variant of Masterwork, but they just made it a cosmetic at the end of the day, which I think is fine. And I'm interested to see how exactly that's all going to filter into this dig site.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for an invention hub, which is where I think this is going to be.
Yeah, I think so too. We were having a bit of a discussion pre-show on this. Do we talk a bit about the Temple of Ikov in terms of how that's going to play in? Because the Temple of Ikov was the quest where we get the Staff of Armadil. The entrance to this dig site is at the Temple of Ikov, but I don't know personally if this dig site is going to involve the Temple of Ikov itself. What do you think on that?
I mean, like you said, it's where, again, a very, very old quest, 2002, where you kind of first encounter Liu Shen and you steal the Staff of Armadil for him. And that's the only real connection between the location and the Armadillian dig site. So maybe there's going to be some connection there. It might be a bit of a reach. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's going to be nice if there is a link.
Yeah, it would. It would. And I mean, you go back in the lore of Temple of Ikov and you might be able to find that. But I did this quest back in 2004. I'm not gonna remember it. I don't know. I don't know when you did this, but it was a long time ago for me. So.
Yeah, very long time ago now.
All right.
2002. It's almost 20 years old.
And it's all being tied together here in 2020.
Wow, yeah.
All right. What did you take away from this journal, or what are you expecting from this dig site?
So this dig site is another really pretty one. They've managed to get some kind of thunder and lightning aesthetic going along all the way through it. It's the second strictly Armadillian location we get. The first one was the Empyrean Citadel, which featured in a lot of the Stiske quests, and that was Armadil's kind of seat of power on Gillinor. It was where his throne was. So this is another floating fortress, kind of very similar to the clan citadels, which I'm not sure if people remember this, but they're also Armadillian relics. These floating islands, apparently they are just around in RuneScape, in Gillinor. They're just a thing.
Yeah, miles up, apparently.
Yeah, that the Armadillians left over and the Avianci left from the God Wars. So, yeah, it sounds like it's going to be an invention hub. It sounds like we're going to learn a lot more about Third Age technology and what were they making in the God Wars. What kind of weapons did they have, maybe? Because this is going a bit more into speculation and things I've heard outside the game with the lore, kind of in discussion with mods.
Yeah, this journal seemed more limited than the rest in terms of what it provided.
But in terms of what I was going to say is about the technology of the God Wars, there's been some implications that it's actually far more advanced than the tech we have in game at the moment. And that when the God Wars ended, it was lost. So maybe we're going to rediscover something.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting because I know they said they wanted to do something like that with invention, but they never did. It was kind of just at the periphery on that when invention first came out, and now here's the kick to really supercharge that ancient technology, except this time through the archaeology skill and with lore, and I think that makes more sense than just dropping it in with the invention.
So
skill.
leaning more into the this is a medieval fantasy game, but are we going to start leaning a little more into fantasy rather than medieval?
That's a
Which
very
I think
good
could be
question.
very exciting.
Yeah, especially for the all the gizmos and whatnot that we're going to be able to create to put on our weapons and the like. I know the PVM folks are already getting very excited about that, and the few that have been leaked going forward, combined with the relics that we'll find, which are across all the dig sites. So that's going to be very fun to see, indeed. Should we move on to Warforged, our last one?
I think so, yep.
All right. And this one is, of course, Bandos themed, if you've been keeping track here. And this is at the old former mobilizing armies area just to the west of Uglog. Now, in the journal on this one, the time sprites lead to a trove of artifacts, including shields, helmets, and goblin mail, all, of course, decorated with ancient tribal goblin symbols. And, as we see in this journal, Ventnose and Wartface are still fighting as they did back in the first Goblin quest, which was a fun little chuckle, and we'll have to see if that makes its way into any of the archaeology aspects on this one. But I enjoyed seeing that. And then it got really sinister because Warforged was an ancient Bandos military institution, and it was said that goblins were sent in and warriors came out. Then there was a message that was dropped by from someone who was just called a friend, and the friend said that they know many stories of Warforged, and none of them were good. This was where Bandos trained his armies. Everybody who went in fought to the death. The survivors that came out became mercenaries, and before being banished at the end of the God Wars, Bandos collapsed the entrance, and that's what we are unearthing here with this dig site. And there's also something called the Forge Wars, where it was said that only a few that went in and were stuck in there when Bandos started to collapse the entrance, only a few escaped when he did that. So absolute utter cruelty on the part of Bandos. But that fits within the character, I think.
Yeah, Bandos is another one we know next to nothing about. I mean, he had a bit of development in the Goblin Quest series, the Cave Goblin Quest line.
World Event 2 as well, but he's dead
World
now.
Event 2, but they killed him off. And I know some mods regret killing him off because it meant they had to, put a stop to his story. That was it. I mean, I wasn't actually playing the game at the time of World Event 2, so I skipped all the, actual action of it. But I don't think it was a bad idea.
Okay.
Kind of in terms of the development it led for Armadillo. I thought that was very interesting. But the disadvantage is that we now know next to nothing about him. I mean, the only real source of proper Bandos lore I could find were the Bandos memories that you unlock after the Mighty Four.
Yeah.
And they work in a similar way to the Zarosian and Seren memories that you can collect around Preftinus and on Frenesco. So they give little snippets of history of how did he become a god and all that jazz. What was his backstory? But other than that, we know nothing.
And I guess that's what we're going to learn in this dig site, rather than the fact that we know much more about, say, a Zamorak or a Zaros, and their dig sites will more be fleshing things out. This will be providing primary source, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. And I think it's going to be interesting. I'm just hearing you read through the journal again. I suspect the friend, in inverted commas, is Zanuck.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
I think you'll need someone who's used to the dark. I think that's Zanuck, looking at it again.
Yeah.
Which is great. She's another character I love a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, it'll be nice to get anything really on Bandos. Even though, he's obviously a despicable character. But just to have some kind of information about him and how he was in the Third Age, and
because we know nothing at this point. This is all we got.
Very little, very, very little.
For our lore summary on Warforged. Literally what we got in the journal here. Like you said, the Bandos memories and the Goblin Quest. That's all we have on Bandos.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which is kind of unfortunate, but we're only a few days away at this point from being able to rectify that, depending on the leveling curve required to get to Warforge. Do you know
what level you need to get into it?
No, we don't. I don't know offhand, at least.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but they mentioned in one of the preview videos.
And, the important part, I think, about this, and this is something that people need to remember with the archaeology skill, is that you unlock Kharid'et at the first dig site. But I think it was mentioned in the live stream that there's content going all the way up to level 117 at that first dig site for people. So it's not something that you're just going to, spend, a day or two at and then move on.
Yeah, from how I understand it, you start at one dig site, level up, and then as you can unlock another one, go and do the other dig site, and then come back to the first one and find out more, and there'll be fresh new stuff for you to do, like you said, all the way up to close to 120.
Warforge is level 76.
76, yeah.
Yeah,
So you can hop between them as your skills increase. You can find new things in the same locations as your skill increases.
Yeah. Stormguard Citadel is level 70, Everlight 42, Infernal Source 20, and Kharid'et level 5. And, of course, you get the first 5 levels from the tutorial, I'm betting.
Yeah, that'll be from the hub.
All right. That pretty much covers what we wanted to talk about for the pre-lore roundup for archaeology in terms of what these journals provided and provide a bit of additional context surrounding them. Is there anything you'd like to throw in on any of these journals before we head off? Anything we missed? Anything that you want to provide to the listeners before we go?
I don't think so. I think I covered all I wanted to cover.
All right. And I guess before we let you go, I'll just ask you, I think it was probably alluded to here, but if you had to pick one of these dig sites, which one are you most looking forward to?
Oh, no, don't ask me that. Don't. It's so hard to pick. I mean, from a lore perspective, the Zoroastrian one, obviously, because I find that really interesting, personally. I'm a huge Zamorak fan, so the Infernal Source is going to be interesting as well. Everlight is gorgeous. Stormguard Citadel is going to be great for, finding out more about Armadil, getting that invention in there. And then Warforge is, finding out fresh stuff. So they're all going to be really good. I think in terms of the ones I'm most excited for, it's tie between Kharid'et and Stormguard.
All right.
But Everlight comes in close as well. It's so hard to pick one.
All right. For me, it's Everlight.
Yeah.
But all right.
Were you in Fest last year for the Everlight demo?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, you missed it. Yeah. It's good. It looked really good.
Only a few days left, so we'll be fine with that.
Monday. So, 5 days.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shane.
You can watch full episodes of RSBANDB Update right here on this YouTube channel. You can also listen to audio versions of RSBANDB Update at update.rsbnb.com, and feel free to subscribe to our show and any number of podcast listeners out there at update.rsbnb.com/subscribe.